The glass was already falling. Lior saw it in slow motion, the crystal tilting off the edge of the silver tray, catching chandelier light, spinning toward marble floor that would shatter it into 40 pieces and cost him the only job paying his rent this month. His stomach dropped. His hands couldn't move fast enough. Then a large, scarred hand closed around it. Clean catch. No rush. Like the man had all the time in the world. Lior's eyes traveled up the arm, up the black suit jacket, past the open collar, past the jaw that looked like it was carved from something that didn't apologize, and directly into the eyes of Nix Ardian Vale, the most feared man in the city. Here, right here, 3 inches away. The smell hit Lior before his brain caught up. Cedar and iron. Something underneath that, older, warmer, like dark honey left in a room where a fire once burned. His lungs pulled it in before he could stop them. His pulse jumped to his throat. His vision sharpened in a way that had nothing to do with fear. The suppressants were working. They were always working. He paid good money every month to make sure of it. But right now, standing this close, something in his chest cracked open like a door forced off its hinges. His mouth moved. He didn't plan it. He didn't choose it. The word came from somewhere older than thought. Baby, careful. The sound left his lips like a breath. Barely audible. But the room heard it. Every conversation in the Vale Grand Ballroom stopped the way music stops when power cuts out. Not gradually, not politely. All at once. Full silence. 300 people in formal wear went completely still. Lior felt it. That collective pause. That held breath. He watched the faces nearest to him turn slowly, carefully, the way you turn to look at something you're not sure you really just saw. The bodyguard who had bumped into him took 1 step back. Then another. Nix hadn't moved. He still held the glass. His eyes were still on Lior. And then, unhurried, deliberate, like a man who had never once in his life been surprised by anything, but had just now encountered something genuinely worth his attention. He smiled. Not warm, not kind, slow, heavy, certain. The kind of smile that didn't ask permission. Lior's whole body registered it. His hands tightened on the tray. His feet wanted to step back but didn't. The air between them felt wrong. Dense, charged, too warm for a room with this much ventilation. Nix leaned forward. Just slightly. Not enough to touch. Enough to make the space between them feel like a countdown. Say that again. 2 words. Low. Private. Spoken like Lior was the only other person in the building. Hi viewers, have you ever said something out loud that your body meant before your mind agreed? Drop it in the comments. What was the word? Lior's throat closed. His mind raced through 6 different responses. Apologies. Deflections. Explanations. He opened his mouth and every one of them evaporated. Because the scent hit him again. Harder this time. Like it was responding to his recognition of it. His suppressants had kept him invisible for 2 years. 2 years of pharmaceutical-grade control. 2 years of small amber pills every morning with a glass of water and a quiet prayer that today would be ordinary. 1 inhale. 1. And they stopped working. His body registered something that his mind had no category for. A warmth that moved through his chest and settled low. A pull that felt less like attraction and more like gravity. Less like want and more like the specific cellular recognition of something returning home. He'd heard people describe this. He'd never believed them. Nix's smile didn't fade. It deepened. And that was worse. Because anger Lior could handle. Dismissal he'd survived 100 times. Power and coldness and the practiced indifference of dangerous men. All of that was familiar. Manageable. This wasn't dismissal. This was the opposite. This was a man who had just decided something. Lior set the tray on the nearest surface with hands that were barely steady. He straightened his jacket. He tried to build something calm and professional back into his face. I apologize, he said. The collision caught me off guard. It won't happen again. Nix tilted his head, unhurried. I didn't ask for an apology. Lior's jaw tightened. He held the eye contact for exactly 1 second longer than was smart. Then he turned to walk away. He made it 4 steps. You felt the bond too. The words were quiet, almost gentle. Lior stopped walking. He didn't turn around. His hand pressed flat against the front of his jacket, right over his sternum, where something was still radiating outward in pulses he could not explain and could not make stop. The bond. The word landed in him like a stone into still water, rings spreading outward, everywhere at once. He turned around. That was the first mistake. Because the moment Lior turned, Nix was already watching him, patient, steady, with the expression of a man who already knew how the next 10 minutes would go and had decided to enjoy them anyway. It wasn't a bond, Lior said. Flat. Final. Nix said nothing. Just waited. I was off balance. The collision. I said something without thinking. It didn't mean anything. Lior kept his voice even. Professional. Every word deliberate. I apologize for the disruption. I'll return to Marcellus. One name, spoken at normal volume. Lior watched every single person in the ballroom react to it. The nearest server set down his tray and moved toward the exit. Then the next one. Then the guests. All of them, smoothly, without question, like water clearing from a drain, began making their way toward the doors. No announcement. No raised voice. One name and 300 people emptied a room. The last set of double doors swung closed with a sound like finality. Lior stood in the middle of a ballroom that had, 60 seconds ago, held an entire city's worth of power players and now held only him, and the man who owned the building they were standing in, and the particular quality of silence that follows when every exit has just been gently, completely sealed. He looked at the doors. He looked back at Nix. You don't have to do that, Lior said. I know. Nix moved toward the nearest chair. He didn't sit with urgency. He sat the way he did everything, like time worked differently for him. Sit down. I'd rather stand. I know that too. Lior stayed standing. Nix studied him. Not rudely. Not hungrily. The way you study something you've been trying to find and have finally located after long enough that the finding itself requires a moment. For 6 weeks, Nix said, I've been picking up a scent in this city. Specific scent. Old bloodline signature. The kind that doesn't just show up without meaning something. He rested one elbow on the arm of the chair. I sent 3 people to track it. They came back with nothing. Lior said nothing. Then tonight you're 4 feet from me and I understand why. You're wrong, Lior said. About which part? All of it. Nix almost smiled. Not quite. You're wearing suppressants. Good ones. I'll give you that. Most people wouldn't catch it. He paused. I'm not most people. Lior's hands were still at his sides. He was managing it. The pull. The warmth. He was pressing it down with everything he had, sorting it behind the same internal door he'd been using for 2 years to keep his nature invisible and his life small and safe and no one's business but his own. He was managing it fine. Until Nix stood up. He didn't move toward Lior. He simply stood. And the shift of proximity, even across 10 feet of marble, sent a ripple through Lior's chest that he felt in his back molars. I need to leave, Lior said. I have someone waiting for me at home. Something crossed Nix's face. Interest. Not jealousy, sharper than that. Who? My daughter. Nix held his gaze for a beat. How old? 7. She has night terrors and I've already been here 3 hours longer than I planned and… Lior moved toward the door. Nix caught his wrist. Not roughly. One hand. Fingers closed around the inside of Lior's wrist, and the contact landed like a live wire. Not pain. Not electricity. More like the moment you step inside a warm building after standing in cold air and your whole body registers the shift at once. every nerve ending recalibrating simultaneously. Lior went still. He couldn't move for 3 full seconds. Nix's thumb pressed lightly against his pulse point. He could feel it. Lior knew he could feel it. The way his heart rate had just jumped from controlled to something much less disciplined. Sometimes the things we resist most are truths we're not ready to face. This was true. Lior understood that intellectually. He still pulled his wrist back. Nix let him. "This conversation isn't finished," Nix said quietly. "Yes, it is." Lior straightened his jacket. "I need to get home." His phone buzzed in his pocket. One buzz. He pulled it out on instinct. And across the room, 2 of Nix's security team entered through the service corridor at a fast walk, speaking in low tones to each other with the kind of clipped exchange that meant something had just gone wrong. Lior looked at his phone screen. "Unknown number." He answered. 3 words from the other end of the line hit him so hard that his vision went gray at the edges. "Eden is gone." The apartment door was already open. Lior saw it from the end of the hallway. Pushed inward, not broken off the hinges, but the lock was wrong. The angle was wrong. Someone had known exactly how to work it. He went in fast. The living room was dark. He hit every light. Kitchen clear. Bathroom clear. Eden's room. Small mattress on the floor. Blanket pulled to the edge. Stuffed rabbit knocked sideways against the baseboard. A child's size 4 sneaker near the door. Just one. He stood in the middle of her room and the silence pressed against his ears. His hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his thighs and breathed through his nose and told himself to think. Be systematic. Look at the room. Look at the evidence. Don't collapse yet. Nix's 2 security men appeared in the doorway behind him. He'd tried to leave them behind at the hotel. They'd gotten into the car anyway. He hadn't had the energy to fight it. "Forced entry on the lock," the taller one said. "Clean work. Professional. How recent?" Nix's voice came from the main room. Lior turned. Nix was there, standing in his daughter's apartment without invitation. And Lior had 30 different things to say about that, but all of them evaporated when he registered the look on Nix's face. Not smug, not calculating, just focused, fully dangerously focused. "Within the last 90 minutes, the second security man said. Nix scanned the room. His eyes moved slow and precise. The way a man looks at a space when he's cataloging it, not just seeing it. He crouched near the bedroom door. Eden's bracelet was on the floor. The small one with the colored beads she'd had since Lior first brought her home. He'd always assumed it was a hospital bracelet someone had left on her. Nix picked it up. He turned it in his fingers. And then he went very still. Lior watched his face change. Not dramatically. No sharp reaction, no loud response. Just a shift in the set of his jaw. A stillness that landed heavier than movement would have. "What is it?" Lior said. Nix stood up. He turned the bracelet so Lior could see the inside face of the center bead, the large amber one that Lior had always thought was decorative. Pressed into it. A mark. Small. Precise. A crest that meant nothing to Lior but clearly meant everything to the man holding it. "That's the Vale bloodline marker," Nix said. The room shifted. Lior heard the words, but his mind ran them back twice before they landed. "That's not possible," he said. Nix's voice was careful, controlled, the voice of a man managing something large. 3 years before you found her, there was a fire at Meridian General, private hospital, East Side, in the maternity wing. During the evacuation, 6 infants from protected bloodline families went missing. He set the bracelet down on the dresser. 4 were recovered. 1 died. He paused. 1 was never found. Lior stared at him. "Eden was placed with you when she was 11 months old," Nix said. It wasn't a question. Lior's breath moved shallow. "That's what the paperwork said," he managed. The agency told me she had no family, no traceable origin. I was told. You were told what someone needed you to believe. The temperature in the room felt lower. Lior looked at the bracelet on the dresser, at the crest. At 7 years of a life he had built around a child he loved like his own blood, and the sudden, terrible weight of not knowing if a single piece of it had been what it appeared to be. His phone buzzed again. One of Nix's men took a call, listened for 10 seconds, then turned to face Nix directly. The surveillance feed from the building across the street. We have her. Lior's chest cracked open with relief so fast it almost put him on his knees. Eden. Alive. The man turned the phone screen outward. A blurry image. A small figure in a dark coat being led toward a car by two people whose faces were angled away from the camera. But Eden was upright, moving on her own. Alive. Lior exhaled. Then Nix took the phone, studied the image, and something behind his eyes went flat and cold in a way that Lior hadn't seen from him yet. Run the plates, Nix said quietly. A pause. The security man's expression did not change, but his voice dropped a register. Sir. The vehicle is registered to your west tower. Nix said nothing for 4 seconds. Then we have a problem inside the house, he said. The penthouse was 43 floors up. Floor-to-ceiling glass on 3 sides. City lights in every direction. The kind of view that made the world look small and manageable and far away from anything that could hurt you. Lior stood at the window and hated how calm he felt. He shouldn't feel calm. His daughter was missing. He was standing in the home of the man the entire city moved around like weather. Not through, not against, simply around, with the understanding that some forces are not navigated, only survived. He should feel trapped. He felt steady. That bothered him more than the fear would have. Sit down and eat something. Nix's voice came from the kitchen. Not a command exactly. More like a statement of preference from someone who expected to only have to say it once. I'm not hungry, Lior said. You haven't eaten since this morning. Lior turned from the window. How do you know when I ate? Nix set a bowl on the counter without looking up. Your hands have been shaking since we left your apartment. Not just stress. Blood sugar. He nodded toward the stool. Sit. Lior looked at the bowl. Looked at Nix. The man was in a different jacket now. Black, no tie. Moving through his own kitchen with the ease of someone who had long ago stopped explaining himself in his own space. Lior sat. Not because Nix told him to, because his legs needed the rest and the bowl smelled like real food, and he had a daughter to get back, and collapsing in a powerful man's kitchen would not help anything. He ate. Nix sat across from him with a glass of water. He didn't eat. He watched Lior with that same still, measuring attention. But tonight there was no smile in it. No possession. Just something quieter. Something that almost looked like concern. Stop looking at me like that, Lior said. Like what? Like I'm something you're deciding what to do with. Nix was quiet for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, I'm trying to figure out how long you've been doing this alone. Lior set his fork down. Doing what? Everything. The word sat between them. Lior looked away. At the city outside. At the lights that didn't care about any of this. The people we fear most are not always the ones who break us. Sometimes they're the ones who show us what safe feels like. And that's its own kind of terrifying. I don't need, he started. I know you don't need anything. Nix's voice was level. That's not what I said. Lior pushed the bowl away. He'd eaten half. That was something. Your team, he said. You trust them? I trust their competence. Their loyalty is something I'm currently reviewing. Nix stood, moved to his desk near the far wall. He pulled open a drawer. Which is why I've been going through records myself tonight. He set a folder on the counter in front of Lior. Lior looked at it. These are adoption placement records, Nix said. From 3 different agencies. All flagged by my legal team 2 years ago for irregular documentation around the time of the Meridian fire. He opened the folder. Most of them are dead ends. He turned to a specific page. Lior's name was at the top. His address. His original placement request. The agency that contacted him. The date Eden was delivered to his apartment wrapped in a yellow blanket with nothing except the bracelet on her wrist and a note that said her name was Eden. Lior remembered that day clearly. This record was generated after the fire, Nick said. Not before. The placement agency that contacted you was registered 6 weeks after the hospital incident. He turned the page. They processed exactly 1 child. Lior's mouth was dry. 1, he repeated. Eden. Nick's met his eyes. Someone created an entire paper agency to place 1 specific child with 1 specific person. He paused. You. Lior heard the implication. He heard all of it. She was not placed with me by accident, he said slowly. Nick shook his head. She was placed with you deliberately. The city lights outside the window blurred slightly. Lior pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose and breathed. He thought about 7 years. 7 years of Eden's laugh. Her drawings taped to the refrigerator. The way she said his name, Lior, like it was its own complete sentence. The night terrors he sat through on the floor beside her bed with her hand in both of his until she stopped shaking. Someone had put her there, in his arms, on purpose, and he did not know why. He looked up. Who? He said. Who put her with me? Nick's jaw was set. That, he said quietly, is what I need to find out. He turned back to the folder and pulled out a second document. Lior leaned forward. The page had a case number at the top and a legal heading he didn't recognize. But below that, in the section labeled Current Guardian Status, the line was highlighted in yellow. The adoption was never finalized. Lior stared at the words. He read them again. Eden was not legally his adopted daughter. Smoke. That was always the first thing. Not fire. Not sound. Smoke, the specific, gray, choking kind that fills low spaces first, the kind that gets into your throat before you see it. Lior didn't know when the memory started. He was sitting on the edge of the couch in Nick's penthouse, staring at the folder with his name on it, and then he wasn't. He was somewhere else. A hallway, institutional lighting, that particular linoleum smell, antiseptic and floor wax and something older underneath. Alarms at a distance, not yet close. He was younger. He'd been inside Meridian General before. The memory came in pieces, not order. The way real memory does, incomplete, textured, certain in the details it chose to keep. The alarm gets louder. Someone is crying. Not an adult cry. The specific, rhythmic, escalating sound of an infant who has been crying long enough that it stopped being reactive and become exhausted. Lior moves toward it. He doesn't remember deciding to. He just does. A side room. A door propped open. Inside. A bassinet knocked sideways against the wall. For stand toppled. Blood on the tiles near the door in a pattern that meant someone left quickly and didn't choose to. And in the bassinet, small, red-faced, working through the last of her air on a cry that no one in the building is left to hear. A baby. He picks her up. He doesn't know why. He just does. And then, Lior. Nick's voice pulled him back. The penthouse. The folder. The city outside. Lior was sitting forward with both hands pressed flat on his knees and his breathing uneven. You remember something, Nick said. Not a question. Lior looked at him. Tried to sort what was memory from what was inference. I was there, he said. The night of the fire. I was there. Nick went still. I had a medical appointment at Meridian. Evening. Late. The alarms went off while I was still in the building. Lior shook his head. I didn't know. I didn't understand what was happening. I just followed the sound. He stopped. There was a baby. In a side room. Alone. Nick sat down. You found her, he said quietly. I didn't know who she was. I didn't know anything. I took her to the corridor, I got her out, and then everything was chaos and there were nurses everywhere and someone told me to wait with her and… Lior exhaled. And then a man came, calm, not panicked like everyone else. He looked at her, looked at me, and said he'd make sure she was safe. What did he look like? Lior tried to find the face in the memory. Gray at the temples, expensive coat, calm in a way that felt practiced rather than natural. Older, polished. He had an accent, not local. He paused. He said his name was. His phone lit up on the table. Both of them looked at it. Nix's security team lead, Marcellus, on the screen. Nix answered it, put it on speaker. We pulled the internal logs from the night of the Meridian fire, Marcellus said. The security archive had been sealed since then. Someone on the inside authorized a clearance override 3 years ago to access those files. A beat. That access code traces back to your council. Nix didn't move. All 3, he said. No. Another pause, the kind with weight in it. 1. Lior watched Nix's face. No anger. No visible reaction. Just that stillness again, the kind that came before, not after. The kind that meant the decision had already been made and everything else was just logistics. Which files did they access? Nix said. The child transfer records, Marcellus said. The identity documents. And the bloodline registry for the Vale succession line. A brief silence. Sir, whoever accessed those files knew exactly what they were looking for. And they removed the original. Removed it, Nix repeated. There's a gap in the archive. The original transfer document. The one that would show who handed off the child and under whose authority. It's gone. Marcellus paused. But we found something else. A copy. Someone made a backup and stored it separately. We're pulling it now. Nix's eyes moved to Lior. Send it to me, Nix said. The call ended. Nix set the phone down slowly. Lior was already watching him. You know which one, he said. Not an accusation. A statement. Nix didn't answer immediately. I have suspicions, he said. I need confirmation. How long have you had suspicions? A beat. Long enough that this isn't a surprise. He stood. What it is a confirmation that the bloodline purge was not opportunistic. It was planned. Someone inside this house wanted to control what came out of that hospital. He turned to face Lior fully. And they've been covering it for years. Lior felt the weight of that settle across his shoulders. 7 years. The placement agency that existed for one child. The bracelet with the crest. Eden's night terrors. The ones she couldn't explain. The ones that woke her from deep sleep gasping with images she had no language for. A child who had been carrying something enormous in a body too small to hold it. One of your 3 council heads, Lior said. Nix's jaw was set. Yes. Which one knew about me? Nix's phone lit up again. He read the screen. Something shifted in his expression. Not shock. Nix Ardian Vale did not appear to operate in the register of shock. But something tightened. Something that was very close to the edge of something much larger being held very carefully in check. He turned the phone screen so Lior could see the attachment Marcellus had sent. The copy. The backup document. The name at the bottom of the original transfer order, the person who had authorized the child's placement, who had chosen Lior specifically, who had built an entire paper agency to make it happen, was someone Lior had never heard of. But below that name, as the authorizing countersignature, was someone Nix clearly knew very well. Lior looked up. Nix was already moving toward the door. Stay here, he said. Where are you going? Nix paused at the door. To ask someone a question they should have answered 3 years ago. He was gone. Lior sat in the penthouse alone with the folder and the city and the specific, nauseating understanding that the man who had just walked out the door was heading toward a confrontation with someone inside his own inner circle who had been lying to his face. and had used Eden and used Lior as pieces in a game neither of them had agreed to play. He looked at his phone. No new messages. No update on Eden. He picked up the folder and read the name at the countersignature line again. He had no idea what it meant yet, but somewhere in the building below him, Nix did. And the traitor had no idea he was already found. Comment below. If you were Lior right now, would you stay in that penthouse? Or would you go after Nix? The lockdown alarm didn't announce itself. 1 second, the penthouse was quiet. The next, every light in the building dropped to emergency red, and the floor-to-ceiling windows went opaque. Smart glass triggered automatically, turning the city view into a wall of frosted nothing. Lior was on his feet before he understood why. Then Marcellus's voice came through the ceiling speaker, flat and clipped. Security Protocol 7. All non-essential personnel to lower floors. Sir, stay inside. The door sealed. An actual lock. Mechanical. Heavy. Lior turned and looked at it. Then looked at the room. Then realized that Nix, who had walked out that door 60 seconds ago to go confront his traitor, was now on the other side of a sealed building in an active security lockdown. His chest tightened. Not his problem. Nix Ardian Vale was not his responsibility. He repeated that to himself twice. It didn't land either time. The door opened. Nix came through it like the lockdown was a minor scheduling inconvenience. Jacket still on. Expression contained. He scanned the room, found Lior standing by the couch, and something in his shoulders released slightly. So slightly that Lior almost missed it. Almost. You're still here, Nix said. You locked the door, Lior said. That's fair. Nix moved to the security panel near the kitchen. His hands worked the screen with the ease of someone who had memorized every override code in the building. The lockdown was triggered from the lobby. Motion sensors. Probably a false read. My team is checking. Probably, Lior repeated. Nix looked at him. Probably. The red light held. Neither of them moved. The room was smaller in emergency lighting. The distance between them, which Lior had been managing carefully all evening, felt less like distance and more like a held breath. Nix set the tablet down. I didn't reach him, he said. Devante, my West Council head. His floor was already cleared. He knew I was coming. That landed hard. He ran, Lior said. He bought himself time. Nix's jaw was tight, which means he's not finished. Whatever he set in motion, it's still moving. Lior sat down on the edge of the couch, not because he was calm, because his legs had been carrying 6 hours of fear and they were done. He looked at the floor, then at his hands. How long have you been looking for her? He said quietly. The missing child. Nix was quiet for a moment. Since the night of the fire, he said. My brother, Caius, his daughter was one of the 6. When they told me she didn't survive, I accepted it. He stopped. I should not have accepted it. Lior looked up. Nix was standing near the window. The frosted glass made the light behind him flat and gray, but his expression was, for the first time since Lior had met him, something unguarded. Not soft, just honest. I failed her, Nix said. For 7 years. You didn't know, Lior said. I should have kept looking. The silence between them changed quality. It wasn't the silence of tension anymore. It was the heavier, quieter kind. The kind that exists between two people who have both been carrying something alone for long enough that setting it down, even briefly, even in the wrong place, feels like relief. Lior exhaled. She's good, he said. Eden. She draws everything. She narrates her own life out loud like she's telling a story to someone. She makes up songs about breakfast. He stopped, pressed his lips together. She's the best person I know. Something moved across Nix's face. He crossed the room. He didn't sit. He crouched in front of Lior, eye level, close, without the height and the suit and the authority getting in the way, and looked at him directly. "I am going to get her back," he said. "That is not a promise I'm making to make you feel better. It's a statement of what is going to happen." Lior held his eyes. His instincts, the ones he'd been medicating into silence for 2 years, responded to Nix's proximity the way they always did now, with that low, bone-deep warmth that had nothing to do with choice and everything to do with something older. "You can't promise that," Lior said. "Watch me." Lior looked at him for a long time. He thought about resistance. He thought about all the very reasonable, self-protective reasons he had built for keeping his distance. From powerful men. From bonds. From anything that required him to trust someone with the parts of him that had already been broken once. He thought about Eden's voice. He thought about the word he had spoken in the ballroom without meaning to, and how it had felt less like a mistake and more like something waking up. He didn't say yes. He leaned forward. Just slightly. Just enough. Nix went still. Then, carefully. Not rushed, not taking. He raised one hand and pressed it against the side of Lior's jaw. Warm. Steady. The same way he'd caught the glass. "No one touches what is mine," Nix said quietly. Lior closed his eyes. For 3 seconds, the whole building could have been on fire and he wouldn't have moved. Then every window in the penthouse exploded inward at once. Glass everywhere. Lior hit the floor before he understood what he was doing. Instinct faster than thought, body already low, arms over his head, the cold shock of impact registering before the sound of shattering finished echoing. Nix was already moving. He covered Lior in one motion. Not a grab, not a pull, just his body between Lior and the open windows, and the sound of gunfire from below cracking against the building's exterior like hard rain on metal. "Tunnel," Nix said. No explanation. No discussion. He pulled Lior upright and they moved. The kitchen floor panel opened with a biometric press from Nix's palm. Below it, a stairwell. Concrete. Emergency lighting running along the base of each step in dim yellow lines. They went down fast. Lior counted floors by feel, 10 steps, landing, 10 steps, landing. His shoulder brushing the wall, Nix 2 steps ahead and never slowing. Behind them, above them, the sound of entry. Multiple points. Coordinated. This was not one person. Nix pressed his earpiece. Marcellus. Southwest Tunnel. Bring Deja and 2 others. Armed. A pause as they descended. And find out who gave the building schematics to Devante's people. They hit the bottom. A door. Then another. Then the air changed colder, lower, moving. Underground. The tunnel ran beneath the building's foundation, lit by overhead strips that buzzed faintly. It smelled like concrete and old water and the particular stillness of a space no one uses until they have to. Nix slowed. He turned back to Lior. His left arm had glass in it. Lior saw it. 3 shallow cuts across the forearm, fresh blood tracking toward his wrist. Nix hadn't acknowledged it once. "You're bleeding," Lior said. "Later." "That's not." "Later, Lior." He said his name like it was something he'd been holding for a while and had just decided to use. Lior exhaled. He tore a strip from the inside hem of his server jacket, still wearing the Vale Grand uniform, which felt like a lifetime ago, and held it out. Nix looked at it. "Wrap it," Lior said. "Now, before you lose more." Nix let him. Standing in an underground tunnel with gunfire somewhere above them, Lior pressed the cloth against the cuts and wrapped it 3 times and tied it off. Nix watched him do it with an expression that had gone somewhere complicated and quiet. "Thank you," Nix said. "Don't make it mean something," Lior said. Too late. A radio burst from Marcellus, somewhere ahead in the tunnel. They moved again. The update came in pieces as they walked. The attacking team had come through the roof and the south windows simultaneously. They'd had detailed floor plans. They knew exactly where Nix would be standing during a lockdown. That kind of information didn't come from outside intelligence. came from inside the house, and Eden, Marcellus reported, was being moved again. Second location, an industrial building near the east waterfront. They want her alive, Nick said, not to comfort Lior, to think out loud. This isn't about harming her. They need her present for the inheritance transfer to hold. Lior processed that. She's heir to something. 1/3 of the empire. Caius's share. Nyx kept walking. If Devante controls her, even as her guardian proxy, he controls the vote. He controls succession. He stopped at a junction in the tunnel. Which is why the purge happened. He needed Caius's bloodline erased or controlled. Not dead. Controlled. 7 years. He'd been planning this for 7 years. And Eden had been the piece he couldn't find. Lior thought about her drawings, her breakfast songs, the way she curled up against him during the night terrors and called his name until she came back to herself. Something hardened in his chest. Not fear. Not anger exactly. Resolve. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that goes quiet and gets specific. What do you need from me? He said. Nyx looked at him. You're not required. I didn't ask if I was required. Lior met his eyes. What do you need? A pause. Then Marcellus appeared at the tunnel junction with 2 of Nyx's team. Deja, steady-eyed and armed, and a man Lior hadn't met yet. Nyx turned back to Lior. I need you to trust me for the next 2 hours, he said. After that, whatever you decide, I won't fight it. Lior held his gaze. 2 hours, he said. They moved. The eastbound tunnel ran 4 blocks before coming up into a private parking structure. 3 vehicles waiting. Deja handed Nyx a clean jacket and a secondary comm unit. Nyx shrugged into it, checked his earpiece, and turned to Lior as they reached the cars. Get in the second vehicle. Stay between my men. Do not. I heard you the first time, Lior said. He got in. The vehicles pulled out. And in the third car, the one Lior wasn't in, the one Nyx watched pull ahead, Marcellus took a call, listened for 11 seconds, and said 4 words that made Lior's blood stop. Sir. The kidnapper called in. Nyx picked up. He listened. His expression didn't change. When he lowered the phone, he looked at Lior through the window between their vehicles, through 2 panes of glass and 60 seconds of silence. The person holding Eden, he said through the comm, gave us a name. A pause. They say they're Lior's brother. The name Devante gave was Zephyr Ash. Lior hadn't heard that name in 11 years. He sat in the back of the vehicle with that information in his hands like something he didn't know how to hold, and the city moved outside the window in the blue-gray of early morning, and he said nothing for 3 blocks. Then he said, Zephyr is dead. Marcellus, in the front seat, didn't respond. He died in a fire. I was told. Lior stopped, pressed his knuckles against his mouth. Thought about the last time he'd heard his brother's voice and how it had come through a phone at 2 in the morning. Panicked and fast and then gone. I was told he didn't make it. The vehicle slowed near the waterfront. Dark buildings. Old industrial. The kind of block that held its breath. Nyx came through on the comm. Lord, whatever this is, it does not change the plan. We get Eden first. Everything else after. Lior took a breath. Understood. They moved into position. The building was a converted warehouse. 4 stories, boarded upper windows, loading dock on the south side. Nyx's team had the perimeter mapped in under 8 minutes. Deja took the east approach. Marcellus went roof access with 2 others. Nyx came to stand beside Lior outside the south entry. The arm bandage was still there, still holding. You don't have to go in, Nyx said quietly. She calls me Lior, he said. Not Dad, not Papa, just Lior. Like it's everything she needs to say. He looked at the building. I'm going in. Nyx didn't argue. The south door came open with a single, clean breach. Inside, concrete floors, high ceilings, emergency lights along the upper beams throwing everything in shadow, stacked crates along the walls, the smell of salt water and old metal, and voices, one set of footsteps, then two, then, small, light, moving fast. Eden. She came around the edge of a crate at a full run, barefoot on cold concrete, her hair loose and her face wet from crying, and she ran directly into Lior's chest with enough force to knock him back a full step. He caught her. He held her so tight she made a small sound of protest. "I got you," he said into her hair. "I got you. Stay right here." She pressed her face against his collar and held on. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. He almost couldn't speak. "Always," he said. Nick stood 3 feet away, watching the two of them, and something happened to his face that he didn't try to hide or cover or rearrange. Something that looked like understanding arriving too late and grief and relief all compressed together in a man who had spent 7 years not knowing this child existed. He looked at Eden the way you look at something that belongs to a version of your life that almost didn't happen. Then footsteps from the upper level. Slow. Deliberate. Someone who wasn't hiding. Lior looked up. The man on the stairs was older than he remembered. Thinner. A scar at his left temple that hadn't been there before. But the eyes, the same dark eyes Lior had grown up across from at a kitchen table for 18 years. Zephyr Ash. Not dead. Here. Lior stood up slowly, keeping Eden behind him. Zeph. Zephyr stopped on the 3rd step. He looked at Lior, then past him at Nyx. "He doesn't know the full story," Zephyr said. "Neither do you." "Then tell me," Lior said. Zephyr came down the last 3 steps. He kept his hands visible. Not defensive. Deliberate. "I was there the night of the fire. Not by accident. I was placed there." He met Lior's eyes. "By Caius Vale. Nyx's brother." Nyx went very still. "Caius knew Devante was planning the purge," Zephyr continued. "He couldn't trust anyone inside the Vale house, so he reached outside. He found me. I was running a courier operation, knew the city, no criminal record, no connections to the Empire." He paused. "He asked me to get the child out, said there was someone who would take her. Someone safe." His eyes moved to Lior. "Someone who would love her." Lior's throat closed. "Caius chose me," Lior said. "Caius studied you for 3 months before he made the call. He watched how you lived, how you treated people. He chose you because you were the most decent person he could find in a city full of people performing decency." Zephyr exhaled. "Then the fire happened faster than planned. Caius didn't make it out. The warehouse went silent. Nyx had not moved, had not spoken." His eyes were on Zephyr with an intensity that could have cut glass. "My brother chose this," he said. "Your brother saved his daughter," Zephyr said. "With the only option he had left." Nyx looked at Eden. She was pressed against Lior's side, watching the exchange with the particular alertness of a child who understands more than adults expect. He crouched down. Same thing he'd done with Lior in the penthouse. Eye level. No height, no authority. Just a man looking at a little girl with his brother's jawline and his own family's eyes. "Hey," he said. Eden looked at him. "I'm your uncle," he said. She considered this for a moment with the gravity of a 7-year-old taking a statement seriously. Then she looked up at Lior. "Is he good?" Lior looked at Nyx. This man. This terrifying, gentle, broken, searching man who had caught a glass in a ballroom and rearranged everything Lior thought he understood about safety and belonging and what it means when instinct speaks before your mind can stop it. "Yeah," Lior said. "He's good." Eden looked back at Nyx. "Okay," she said simply. Nyx's jaw worked. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he stood, turned to his team, and said in a voice that had gone rough at the edges, "Find Devante. Tonight." Lior put his arm around Eden. "Love is not possession. It is choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. He stayed. He'd already decided. But the traitor was not finished. From the upper level, one of Nix's men called down with new information. A document found in the building, left deliberately where it would be discovered. A second heir. The file made clear. Another child from the Meridian Fire had survived the purge. Different bloodline. Different location. Same operation. The inheritance war was not over. It had barely started. Devontae Briggs had not run far. That was the thing about men who believed they were untouchable. They didn't build escape plans the way cornered people did. They built contingencies, fallbacks, secondary positions that assumed they would still be negotiating from a place of leverage. Devontae was at the private docks by 4 in the morning. He had 3 boats, 2 lawyers on standby, and a sealed transfer document that, if filed before the council convened, would place Eden's inheritance under a provisional guardianship order, one that named a shell organization he'd been building quietly for 9 years. He had it all mapped. He had not mapped for Nix arriving first. When Devontae stepped onto the dock, Nix was already there. Standing at the end of the main pier in the gray pre-dawn, jacket open, hands at his sides, no weapon visible. Alone by appearance. Devontae stopped walking, 12 feet between them. The water behind Nix moved in small black waves. "You moved fast," Devontae said. "You moved sloppy," Nix said. Devontae's jaw tightened. He was a large man, broad, silver-haired, 60 years of accumulated power sitting in his posture like furniture that had never been moved. He'd sat across from Nix in council chambers for 11 years. He'd watched Nix's empire grow and told himself he was part of it. He'd been planning its fracture the entire time. "It wasn't personal," Devontae said. "I know," Nix said. "That's actually what I find offensive." The pier lights hummed. Devontae reached into his jacket. Not for a weapon, for papers. The transfer document. He held it up. "This file's in 3 hours. You can't stop the legal mechanism once it's in motion, you know that. Even you." He kept his voice level, confident. The voice of a man who still believed he had options. "Walk away, Nix. Let me take the seat. The child is alive. Your Omega is alive. Take what's yours and step back." Nix looked at the document, then looked at Devontae. "You want to know what you missed?" Nix said. Devontae didn't answer. "You've been watching me for 11 years. You know how I respond to threats. You know how I protect assets. You mapped my security protocols, my blind spots, my loyalties." Nix tilted his head. "But you never once thought to ask what Caius left behind." A pause. "He left a letter," Nix said. "Sealed. Dated the night before the fire. He knew what you were planning. He documented everything, the purge plan, the shell accounts, the council vote manipulation, and he gave it to someone outside the house to hold until it was needed." He paused. "You found the child. You never found the letter." Devontae's hand dropped slightly. From the far end of the dock, lights came on. Not floodlights, navigation lights. 3 vessels moving in from the harbor. And on the pier behind Devontae, 2 council members appeared from the access stairway. The ones Devontae had assumed were his. The ones he'd cultivated for years with quiet favors and patient loyalty building. They were not looking at him with loyalty. They were looking at him with the particular expression of people who had just been shown evidence they couldn't argue with. Marcellus stepped forward and took the transfer document from Devontae's hand. Clean, efficient, no struggle. Because there was no point in struggling against something that had already been decided. Devontae looked at Nix. "You set this up before you came to the docks," he said. "I set this up 3 hours ago," Nix said. "The moment I saw Caius's signature on the original transfer order." He walked forward. "You took 11 years from my family. You took a child. You burned a building. And you sat at my table and let me feed you and call you counsel." He stopped close. This is not the part where I lose control. This is the part where you understand that every move you made was visible to me from the moment I had the letter. Devante looked at the council members behind him, at Marcellus, at the sealed document now in Marcellus's hands. He looked back at Nix, and for the first time in 11 years of sitting across from this man and believing he was managing him, Devante Briggs understood that he had never, not once, been ahead. "What happens now?" he said. "Now," Nix said, "you leave. Not prison. Not public spectacle. Not a scene that would be difficult to explain to the financial institutions and political figures whose relationships made the empire function. Something quieter, more complete. The accounts, the holdings, the council seat, the access codes, the contracts, all of it was already gone. His lawyers would spend the next 6 months discovering that every legal handhold he'd built had been systematically removed before he'd even arrived at the dock. He was not being destroyed. He was being erased. Devante left. Nix watched him go until the dock lights swallowed him. Then he turned and looked down the pier toward the car where Lior was sitting with Eden asleep in his lap, her head against his shoulder, her feet tucked up, one small hand wrapped around his jacket collar the way she apparently always slept, gripping something to make sure it didn't go anywhere in the dark. Nix walked back toward them. The traitor was gone. But Marcellus pulled him aside before he reached the car. Quiet voice. Quick exchange. The second document. The file found in the warehouse. Another child. Another bloodline. Another survivor from the Meridian fire. Alive. Somewhere in the city. The inheritance war was settled. But what Caius had started, what Devante had tried to bury, went deeper than any of them had mapped. 3 weeks later, the apartment smelled like paint. Eden was working on a mural. That was what she called it. A mural, with the complete seriousness of a person who had decided the living room wall was a canvas and the matter was not open for debate. Nix had not objected. He'd bought better brushes. Lior stood in the kitchen of the new place. Larger than the old apartment, a full floor in a building that Nix technically owned but had stopped mentioning the fact of because Lior had asked him to stop mentioning it, and watched the morning come in through the east window. His suppressants were on the counter, still in the bottle. He hadn't taken them in 11 days. Not because Nix had asked him not to, because one morning he'd stood at the sink with the pill in his palm and understood that he'd been taking them to stay invisible in a life that no longer required invisibility. To protect a version of himself that no longer needed that particular kind of protection. He put the bottle in the cabinet. He made coffee instead. Nix came in at 8. He did this now. Came in the morning, stayed through the parts of the day that mattered, learned how Lior's household ran and fit himself into it without trying to restructure it. He had understood, without being told, that this was the right approach. He was a man of enormous, dangerous power. He had learned how to be gentle with something worth being gentle with. "She's already out of blue," Nix said, nodding toward the living room. "She burned through the first tube in 40 minutes, Lior said. "There's a backup in the drawer." Nix found it, brought it to Eden, returned. He poured his own coffee and stood beside Lior at the window. They stood like that for a while. Not filling the silence, just existing in it the way people do when they've stopped being afraid of what the quiet between them might reveal. "You know what I've been thinking about?" Lior said. "Tell me." "The glass." He looked out at the morning. "In the ballroom. The way it was falling, and I knew it was going to hit the floor, and there was nothing I could do about it." Nix was quiet. "And then you caught it," Lior said. "And I said, 'Baby.'" Nix said it simply, without drama. "Baby," Lior repeated. "And I spent the next 12 hours treating it like a mistake." He paused. "It wasn't a mistake." Nix set his coffee down. He turned to face Lior. And Lior, who had spent 2 years making himself small, making himself quiet, making himself invisible in a world that had taught him early that the cost of being seen was too high, turned back. No suppressants, no management, No careful architecture of distance. Just himself. Nix raised one hand and pressed it to Lior's jaw the way he had in the locked penthouse. Warm, steady, asking nothing. And Lior leaned into it the way he hadn't let himself that night. The bond moved through him. Not violent this time. Not a jolt, not a disruption. Something slower. The way light fills a room when the curtain is finally pulled. Not sudden. Just complete. I accept it, Lior said. The bond. You. All of it. Nix looked at him for a long time. His thumb moved against Lior's jaw. Just once. I know, he said quietly. Not triumphant. Not possessive. Just known. From the living room, Eden's voice rose up. Lior, come see. I made you. They both looked toward the doorway. She painted me? Lior said. You, me, and something that I think is meant to be a wolf, Nix said. Why a wolf? I didn't ask. I recommend not asking. Lior laughed. Came out fully. Without caution. The sound of it surprised him. How much room it took up. How natural it felt. How long it had been since laughter didn't come with the footnote of checking whether it was safe. It was safe. He walked into the living room. Eden was standing in front of the wall with paint on her elbow and her chin and both knees, deeply satisfied with herself. The mural was large, slightly chaotic, brilliant in its own logic. 3 figures, one small, one medium, one tall, standing together against something that might have been a sunset or an explosion or both. That's you, she said, pointing to the medium figure. You're in the middle because you hold everything together. Lior looked at the painting. He looked at his daughter, Caius Vale's daughter, his daughter, a child who had been placed in his arms on purpose by a man who had studied him from a distance and decided he was safe enough, decent enough, steady enough to be trusted with something irreplaceable. He had not known, that night in the smoke and the alarm, that he was being handed a life. He just heard a baby crying and followed the sound. What began as a mistake became the place he was always meant to belong. He crouched down and looked at the mural at Eden's eye level. It was genuinely extraordinary. That wolf is very good, he said. That's not a wolf, she said. What is it? She looked at him like the answer was obvious. That's home, she said. Nix appeared in the doorway. He looked at the painting, then at Eden, then at Lior. He smiled. Not the slow, dangerous, possessive smile from the ballroom. This one was different, warm, quiet, the smile of a man who had stopped looking. Because he had found what he was looking for. 3 weeks later, a sealed envelope arrived at the building's front desk. No return address. Delivered by hand, per the security log, a courier no one had hired. Inside, a single photograph. A child, roughly Eden's age, standing outside a building in a city that wasn't this one. On the back of the photograph, in handwriting that matched no one in the current investigation. He survived too. You should find him before Devontae's people do. Nix held the photograph for a long time. Then he looked at Lior. We're not done, he said. Lior looked at the photograph, at the child's face, at the quiet, stubborn fact of another life that someone had tried to erase and failed to. No, he said. We're not. If the story moved you, if you felt every moment Lior chose to stay, share it with someone who needs to hear that love is not a mistake. It is a direction. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Every story on this channel is built to remind you that the people who find each other in the hardest moments are not accidents. Don't miss what comes next, because the second child's story changes everything. Drop a comment below and tell us, what was the moment you knew Lior had already chosen Nix, before he even admitted it to himself?